Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good morning, friends. We've got a power-packed episode for you today. It's a little disjointed, a little all over the place, but I think we've got some good content for you. So let me give you an outline. So I'm going to start out with a few personal stories. As I bump into listeners around the country, you tell me you like it when I kind of open up and share some things about my life. So I got a few little personal stories I'm going to share with you today. Then I'm going to share a couple of things I'm hearing in the counseling room a lot. And I want to just kind of give a few tidbits of thoughts related to something that keeps coming up a lot in the counseling room. And then you may remember I said that I was going to say a few things about AI and what jobs may be disintermediated and what jobs potentially could experience a boom as a result of AI. So I've been doing a little research on that. I'm going to read a very short article and share a few thoughts on that. And then I said I was going to come back and share some of the stuff going on in Florida. And believe it or not, in addition to all that, I've got an admissions vernacular for you, some admission tips, and grinding my gears, which a number of you have told me is your favorite. And then we've got part 3 or 4. It's the interview on athletics, student athlete advisors. That's right. We've got Joe, we've got Reed, we've got Katie, we've got Amy. And this is my favorite segment of the 4 that they do. I think some of the practical advice in this segment on how to know if a college is serious about you is just really, really good. So let's dive in. I'm going to start out with the personal stuff. Like I said, very eventful week. So it was really windy like 3 or 4 days ago. It was like 35 miles an hour. And hearing all these noises outside, man. Well, my neighbor's to the right, Steven, he's got kind of a lot of stuff going on. He's got like these dogs and dog kennels, and he's got a lot of stuff. So I look out the window and I see some things going on over there. Go back, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and Anitra's like, one of our trees fell down and it's in Steven's yard. I look out the window and took out a huge portion of his fence. Now, first, I'm a little upset at myself because our landscaper told me maybe around 6 months ago that you got a couple dying trees out here, and I wouldn't wait too long before you have the tree guy come out and take care of them. Now, the way I organize my money is I have accounts for everything. Like I'll have a tax account, I'll have a travel account, I'll have a car expense account, and I'll have a healthcare expense account, and I'll have a restaurant account, and I have a wedding account. I just have accounts. I have a home repair account. And so I like to do that because if I get a big bill, it kind of doesn't feel like I have the bill because that's kind of what the money was sitting there for. So I should have tapped the home repair account, but no. What do? I say, I'm going to start a tree removal account. So it's building up that tree removal account. I figure, it's going to be, at least a couple $1,000s. And before I got it built up enough, bam, comes down. So have the tree guy out. And he's like, that white birch has to go. It's 125 feet. It's dying. And then that other tree over there, it's got so much weight, it's going to hit Steven's neighbor, fence and maybe even his house. So, and these things are so high up and he can't climb a dying tree. So he's got to bring this $150,000 machine. There's like this crane that like an elevator thing that goes way up 100 feet in the air so that he's not climbing a dead tree. So anyway, I'm out $3,800 on that. And then I'm not that extravagant, but every once in a while I do something a little extravagant. Probably the most extravagant thing I think I have ever done is I lit our backyard up. Like I like landscape lighting, so I have our backyard all lit up. I just like it. So now, of course, all those trees that have to come down, they have all the electrical wiring. So now you got to have the electrical guy come out. So I'm probably going to be out $5,000. But here's the thing. I'm increasingly learning to look at the glass half full and not half empty in life. What if that tree hit somebody? What if that tree hit a house? Furthermore, you could not have two better neighbors than I have. Joyce, to my left from California, just sweet as it gets. Sweetest 73-year-old lady you're ever going to want to know. Steven, he's probably like 45-year-old guy from Ohio. This is how cool he is. So I'm like, oh, geez, I got to talk to Steven about this. I know he's chill, but I had to argue with Steven for me to cover any of the costs. He's like, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it, dude. We're good. I can't let him pay for it. I jacked up his fence with my tree. The only thing he let me do, he's going to fix the whole entire fence. He won't take any penny. He said, if you can just pay to get that tree chopped out on my yard, and then we're good. So, you know what? I'm increasingly like, in life, you have to look at the glass half full and not half empty. So that's my first story. Second story. Kara's wedding in Raleigh is set November 8th. Now, the India one is looking like February, not totally set, but the Raleigh one is set. And my brother and I are having a little bit of a competition to see who can get in the best shape by the wedding. So we're out here doing aerobics and all this stuff. Now, he's always been hardcore into weights. I never have. I stopped doing weights. Last time I even did weights a single time was like in the early 90s. I kid you not. But I decided to get a Bowflex. That's right. The Bowflex got delivered yesterday, and the people are coming to set it up about an hour after I'm done recording here. So I am determined to see how good I can get in shape in the next 7 months and 20 days. All right, a few announcements. I am going to be in Baltimore for the 16th and 17th of May. I'm coming to town for a retreat, actually. 30 of us will be in St. Michael's, which is in Maryland. 10 private college coaches, 10 school-based college counselors, and 10 senior admission leaders for like a retreat where we like talk about what are we hearing out there? What are we learning? It's a conference actually called No Name. And so that's where I'll be from the 18th to 20th, but I'm coming in early on the 16th and 17th. One of those days I'm going to meet with a family I'm working with. But I do have another day free if anybody wants to either do a small gathering. You know, I do these small gatherings with podcast listeners. They're a lot of fun. I try to listen to you guys. A lot of times they're in restaurants. Sometimes they're in homes. If that's of interest to anybody, reach out to me. Just text me at 404-664-4340. Love to meet podcast listeners when I'm traveling. I'm just going to be back in the hotel, either working on another podcast or meeting with somebody on Zoom. So I'd love to kind of get out and meet some locals. Don't forget our Colorado event is April 8th. That's 23 days away. And that's if you're hearing this on a Monday. If you're hearing it later than a Monday, it's less than that. Now, I originally designed the sign-up form, and my design skills are pretty weak. You know, Hillary reaches out to me early in the week, like, can you send that thing to me so I can edit it? And I went in and looked at it, and I'm like, okay, now I see why Hillary's on the comms team, because it looks so much better. Check out the new revised form. It's at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the events page. And it's got some more information that you can share that's really helpful. And if you live close by in Colorado, you know, please spread the word. Let's get the word out. All right, let me get into a couple things I'm hearing in the counseling room. So I'm doing a counseling session this week, student from Northern Virginia. And, you know, the dad speaks up and he says, you know, this is going to surprise you. And you know what? Before he even went any further, I knew what he was going to say. Why did I know what he was going to say? Because it's something that I kind of hear a fair amount. So what was he going to say? Well, this was a student, hockey obsessed. He was really down to CU, the University of Colorado, and DU, Denver University. For months, it's DU-CU battle. And Dad says that I think you might want to stay closer to home. I think he might want to stay closer to home. The farthest he probably would go is Syracuse. She's also in at, and probably the farthest south he would go would be South Carolina, but he probably is going to want to stay within 2 hours. And he wanted to talk to me about it. Well, I hear this a lot. And the tip, this is my admissions tip, make sure you have a couple schools close to home that you would be happy to go to, because it's pretty common for somebody to, as it gets closer, they decide they just want to be closer to home. I actually did that myself. As a kid growing up, as a kid, you're kind of superficial, right? I was all about like the weather. So I wanted to go to San Diego State. I remember that, like 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, San Diego State. All I was thinking is I love San Diego. I want to go to San Diego State. My oldest daughter, Karis, was a lot more serious. I really thought she was going to go to California. At the end of 10th grade, we took a big trip, Pomona, Pitzer, Oxy, Scripps, Pepperdine, a bunch of schools we visited. And she applied and was admitted to a bunch, did another fly-in back there. And she ended up, I just don't know if I want to go that far away. So it happened to me. It happened to Karis. Now, sometimes the opposite happens, right? Like Joy, because Joy went to University of Georgia, she's like, I got to get out of Georgia. I've been here too long. I need to go to grad school in another state. So that can also happen. But the point is, have a couple schools close to home you'd be happy to go to, because sometimes at the end of the day, you just decide you want to be close to home. Does it happen most of the time for people that are looking afar? No. Does it happen at least 10% of the time? I would say, yeah. Now, here's the second thing I'm hearing a lot in the counseling room. And it's understandable, right? Seniors, I am just so sick of this college stuff. I'm not talking about senioritis. I'm not talking about senior slump. I'm not talking about burnout with school, and I don't want to turn the paper, and I addressed that a couple of weeks ago. I'm talking about, I'm just sick of this college thing. I'm over with it. I don't want to go to another admitted student visit day. I don't want to go to another, local info session where they're traveling here. I don't want to read any more mail. I just want to make the decision. While that's understandable, I don't want you making a hasty decision. Sometimes you're driving, you see fog, right? And it's all you can see is fog. And you're like, oh my goodness, maybe I'd better pull over. It's so foggy. But if you keep going and going, as you get closer to your destination, it starts to become a lot more vivid and the picture becomes a lot clearer. And that's a lot how this college process is. You have until May 1st. Doesn't mean you need to use May 1st, but don't just arbitrarily make a decision like next Tuesday, I'm making a decision. I'm sick of it. Don't do that. You don't want to end up transferring. Just take your time and ultimately go where you're most at peace with. All right, let's talk about AI. So a couple articles I read this week. One is Microsoft's analysis of jobs that are vulnerable and jobs that are safe. So here's what the article says. Research from Microsoft highlights jobs that are highly susceptible to automation, such as administrative assistants, content writers, telemarketers. At the same time, it identifies careers that remain largely immune. And these are ones that require empathy, strategic thinking, and complex problem solving. While AI can handle routine and repetitive tasks, it cannot replace the uniquely human skills that drive creativity, leadership, and relationship building. This dual perspective shows that some sectors must adapt quickly while others continue to offer security and growth. Understanding both sides of the AI impact helps workers make informed career decisions in a changing landscape. Now, I got a really good email a while ago from a listener that said, I've heard you talk about AI in admissions, but can you talk about how AI is disrupting the job market? So I wanted to share with you this Microsoft article, as well as the perspective from Anthropic, which I'll also share in a second, because Anthropic revealed some research. Anyway, the Microsoft article goes on to say, Although AI excels in efficiency and precision, it cannot replicate intuition, empathy, or ethical judgment. Human workers bring emotional intelligence. Human workers bring ethical reasoning and innovation to the table. Human workers make collaboration between AI and humans essential. Companies that successfully integrate AI find that it augments human capabilities rather than replacing them entirely. Focusing on skills that AI cannot replicate, such as creativity, problem solving, and leadership, remains key for long-term career success. By understanding which roles are at risk and which are safe, workers can navigate the evolving job market with confidence. All right. And then at first I was going to read all this to you. I'm not. It goes on to say top 40 jobs that are most vulnerable for AI replacement. And then it talks about 40 jobs that likely will thrive. You know, the reason I want to read it is if you read all these jobs, you'll start having people having a panic attack because it's, you know, they list almost everything. And, you know, it's not going to completely supplant them. It's just going to, you know, well, in some cases, yeah, maybe. But in most cases, it's just going to alter them. So, so I'm not going to read that part of the article, but you know, it's there if you're interested. And then when it goes on and it says, here's one more thing I will read that says in terms of not all jobs are at risk, professions safe from AI. While many roles are highly susceptible to AI automation, numerous careers that remain relatively safe from replacement. These professions require human creativity, emotional intelligence, complex decision-making, specialized physical skills that AI cannot replicate. Now, some of the jobs that it lists are in the trades craft, you know, field, and some of them are in the medical field, and there's just a bunch of them. Maybe for another day, we'll get into some of those specifics. All right, let me jump to the second article. This article is a lot of buzz. It was all over the news, social media, a lot because the Anthropic CEO is in a battle with the Trump administration and got pretty contested. And he's been pretty outspoken about things. So here's the title of the article if you want to look it up. It's by Victor Tangerman, Tangermann, published March 11th, 2026. And it's called Anthropic Announces Jobs Most at Risk from AI. All right. It says the AI jobs apocalypse, long predicted by tech leaders and AI critics alike, has never felt closer. Major job market disruption has been rumored for years now, but given the latest swings on Wall Street and major layoffs roiling the tech industry, the alarm bells are starting to go off. It's looking entirely that not every profession will be hit in the same way, nor to the same extent, a topic that frontier AI companies have been studying intensely. Last week, while the company's CEO was engaged in a major fight with the Pentagon, Anthropic released its latest findings about the labor market impacts of AI. The company found that while AI is far from reaching its theoretical capability and actual coverage remains a fraction of what's feasible, many occupations are at higher risk of AI displacement. By taking into consideration theoretical, large language model capability, and real-world usage data, the team concluded, here we go, that computer programmers, they said, are the number one job at risk, computer programmers. Other jobs at risk, customer service reps, data entry keyers, medical record specialists, market research analysts, were at the highest risk since they're most exposed to AI's capabilities. Other affected occupations include investment analysts, software quality assurance, information security analysts, as well as computer user support specialists. Anthropic found that workers in these most exposed professions are more likely to be older, female, more educated, and higher paid, highlighting gaps around gender education and more as the effects of AI in the job market begin to come into focus. The finding echoes the previous research that similarly found women-dominated occupations are more vulnerable than AI disruption in the workforce. seems like women and people of color are always more at risk. It just seems that way, whether it's health, maladies, or it just seems that way. Anyway, on the other end of the spectrum, the least exposed categories include professions that rely on physical presence, including cooks, mechanics, lifeguards, bartenders, dishwashers, dressing room attendants, according to Anthropic. Noble careers, but not ones for particularly paying well. There's nothing particularly new about the conclusion that programmers are far more at risk from being made redundant by AI tech. Silicon Valley titans have been laying off thousands of workers as they continue to double down on their sizable investments in data centers. Most recently, Twitter founder and Block CEO Jack Dorsey laid off nearly half the staff at his fintech company, citing intelligent tools we're creating that are allowing for smaller and flatter teams. Within the next year, I believe the majority of companies will reach the same conclusion and make similar structural changes, Dorsey wrote in a statement last month. But how much advancements in AI tech are really contributing to layoffs remains a subject of heated debate. Former Block employees have come forward to claim Dorsey's led layoffs were more likely an instance of corporate downsizing after a rash of pandemic-era overhiring. As Anthropic itself admits, we are still nowhere near AI's theoretical capability, meaning the wave of job losses may not be due to AI automation. Then there's all the noise that could make it extremely difficult to gauge how many jobs were actually lost to AI or due to unrelated factors like rising geopolitical instability, triggering economic uncertainty. Nonetheless, the company's foreboding forecasts are rapidly changing labor landscape. Now, here's the scary part. As colleges and universities face an existential threat, undermining the value of degrees. And I'm going to talk to you another time about the growth of the 3-year degree. You know, I said I would drop a tidbit from my Florida trip. 20% of the schools in Florida now offer a 3-year degree. That's one thing I learned on my trip. Computer science and computer engineering students in particular could be in deep trouble as employers continue to double down on AI. Instead, according to Anthropic analysis of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics data, they'd be better served becoming electricians, nurses, lawyers, and accountants. Anthropic has identified those professions, electricians, nurses, lawyers, and accountants, as occupations that are expected to grow between 2024 and 2034. So this is a topic that we are inevitably going to come back to over and over and over again. I just kind of want to whet your appetite for a couple pretty popular articles that came out on this topic this week. All right. Let's transition to another topic I said I'd discuss with you. And I want to preface it by saying this. Have you ever wondered why some states' public schools, flagship and land grant, are really hard to get into and other states aren't? I mean, when you look at schools like UT Austin, the University of California system, University of Virginia, University of North Carolina system, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Michigan, Wisconsin, you have some of the hardest public schools in the country to get into. And then when you look at schools like Delaware or Vermont, they're literally begging outsiders, meaning outside the state, to apply to the school, New Mexico and others. And there's some states like schools like San Diego State have a disparate admission rate, meaning significantly higher for out-of-state than in-state. Well, a lot of it can be explained by this. The harder the school gets to get in, the more the residents get restless, understandably so. After all, they're paying the tax dollars to fund the place. So then they pressure the politicians to put policies in place, and then you get very restrictive in-state versus out-of-state admission policies. And I want to showcase that for you by talking about what's going on in Florida. So I mentioned it briefly, but I want to go into a little bit more depth because I think it could be relevant to some our listeners. So there's legislation going right now through the House and the Senate attempting to make it through in 2026. It's called HB 1279 if you want to look it up. And what HB 1279 says is that for certain schools in the state of Florida, and there are 4 of them that they're focusing on, they cannot take more than 5% of non-Florida students. Now, that would be the most restrictive policy of any school state in the country. I mean, just being 5% international is low, but 5% for all the 49 other states and all international, and it would impose really, really serious fines. So, for example, if you look at, right now what the policy says is it has to be 90% Florida. However, it's a little deceptive because when you think 90% Florida, you think, wow, snap, there's only a 10% chance at a place like UF, which is the most popular school in the state. Florida State, second most popular. Then you got schools like USF, FIU, UCF, others, right? But the reality is the way the policy is written is that 90% rule is for all of the schools within the UF or within the Florida system. And a lot of the schools within the public system of Florida may be 98% right now because they don't attract a lot of out-of-state students. So in reality, UF, University of Florida, is almost 20% out of state right now. And I have noticed from our data in our company, the one I found at School Match for You, I don't really see a big in-state, out-of-state difference when I look at who gets in. When I look at places like Georgia Tech or UNC, or UVA or Wisconsin or Michigan or Texas, I see a really big difference between the in-state and the out-of-state student. And for Florida, I really don't. That's because while on paper it looks like it's 90%, you have places like University of North Florida, Florida Poly, they're so high Florida percentage that UF could be a lower percentage and still, now it's still selective. I don't want to make it sound like it's not selective. I said last week, according to our data, University of Florida is the 8th hardest public school to get in. Wisconsin, very, very similar. I mean, Florida, Wisconsin, Georgia, Illinois, they're all fairly close to each other within a couple of percentage points. I mean, right now, UF's acceptance rate out of state is 14. It is expected to go down to under 5 with this new policy, this drastic cut. Because let's just look at the tuition. Florida has it's the second or the third lowest in-state tuition for state residents, like $63.80. That is $30,900 out of state. Big difference. So this is through the House. It's passed. Will it get through the Senate? It's pretty controversial. It's going to be a $54 million shortage in the budget if they take all that money they're getting right now from out-of-state students and they get it. And it has to go in-state. And so there's a massive debate, and they are saying that it really wouldn't fully be in effect until 2030. But if a school violates the policy, if it goes forward, I mean, they're talking about some ridiculously stiff fines. I'm talking like $25 to $100 million type fines. So nobody's going to want that, right? So we'll have to see what happens. And of course, there's a controversy, and people are debating, like, how are we going to make up that $54 million budget? How are we going to make it up? We need out-of-state students. They're paying $30K instead of a little over $6K for tuition. Now, this is the thing that's grinding my gears, all right? I think that when a student enrolls in a college, there's a basic trust that you might have a tuition hike, but you're not going to gouge me, not ridiculously. Now that my kid is at the college, they've got their friends, they know their professors, they're involved in their internships and their clubs. They're ensconced in the life of the school. I don't want to just disrupt them and uproot them. So I think the public expects, or you should expect, to be honest, anywhere from a 3 to 6% increase. Now, your salaries may not be going up that much, but those have been the traditional rates that education has gone up in this country. But one of the things that Florida is doing to gouge out-of-state students, and this is an argument by supporters, is We are going to whack the out-of-state students. And they have already passed legislation for a 15% tuition hike for out-of-state students for 2026. 15%. That is grinding my gears. I don't like it when I go to the Denver airport and I think I'm paying a certain amount for my rent-a-car, and then it jacks up 35% because of all these taxes that they nailed, and impose on the out-of-state residents because you're trying to raise money and you don't want to whack the residents. But I kind of am used to that, right? It kind of goes with the turf. I need the money to do whatever, airport repairs or whatever it is. So hit the outsiders. And I use Denver because I remember one time when I was like, are you kidding me? But it's really true pretty much everywhere. But to me, that's a little bit more understandable. But when I've got a student, it's not me personally, but I'm speaking as if it's me because I'm getting worked up. And they're in the school and you're going to go up 15%. I remember when I was at Westtown one year, we went up 10% one year. It was for a noble purpose. It was to increase faculty salaries. But that was not fun, explaining to families why their tuition bill was going to go up about $3,500 in 1 year because of a 10% increase. And in some cases, it was even more. I was like day students, like boarding students. It was even more than that, like $5,000 in 1 year. And we said, we'll increase financial aid and make it work for the people that can't afford it. That was not fun. But 15%, I'm sorry, that's just wrong. And friends, to make matters worse, the proponents of the bill are not acting like this 15% increase in 2026 is a one-time thing. They're saying, oh no, we will continue to aggressively hit the 5% with exorbitant increases. Now they're trying to make a case against the people that are like, hey, we can't afford the $54 million hit to the budget that happens with this. They're trying to make that case. But, I mean, come on. And one of the reasons I'm sharing this with you is because if you're looking at Florida as an out-of-state student, you need to know what you're going to be looking at should this pass. And it's already through one of the chambers, and I expect it to fully pass. And that's grinding my gears today. All right. I said I would also give you some admissions vernacular. The term open door. If you hear a school say, we're an open door school, or we're a school that has an open door policy, what that refers to are colleges who are not making you apply into a major. They're not even making you apply into a division of studies. You're just applying to the college as a whole. And then once you're in the school, you'll select your major. That's called an open door policy. So I had to give you, it's been a while, had to give you some tips, a grinding my gears, and an admissions vernacular. All right, friends, let's transition to my favorite segment of the 4-part segment with Joe and Reed and Katie and Amy, student athlete advisors, where you get some real tangible, concrete advice on how to know if a college is serious with you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, friends, we've reached part 3 on tips for athletes who want to play in college. In part 3, Amy talks about what she wants in a coach's recommendation letter that she's going to get, and when does she want to receive this. Joe talks about how essential it is to send customized, personalized contacts to each college, but how you have to be creative and smart with the use of your time. Joe talks about how ID camps can be extremely useful, or they can be a colossal waste of time. And he gives some of the best advice for a student athlete on how to know if a camp is a waste of your time. Friends, I've asked a lot of experts this question, and Joe's answer is the best one I've ever heard. Amy talks about how important it is to start out with a great targeted list. Amy talks about whether she likes it when a student just asks her directly, where am I on your recruitment priority list? Amy talks about how you have to translate coach speak. Reed talks about how parents who are over involved in the recruitment process hurt their kids' chances of getting an offer. And Katie shares some areas where it's absolutely appropriate for parents to be involved. Listen and enjoy. So I had a question for you on the reference, because you mentioned having the coach reference can be great. So do you like the idea of like an attached letter, or do you like more the idea of here are 2 or 3 coaches that think I'm a good fit for your school, or one coach that think I'm a good fit for your school, who say they'd be more than happy to talk to you. And then maybe if you like the video, you kind of like the idea of, oh, this sounds legit. Like, because I've kind of seen it done both ways. Do you like more like the attached letter, or like, here's a coach who says he's happy to talk to you? And like, a lot of times those coaches will make calls themselves too, on behalf of
Right.
kids. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I have my student athletes include 1 or 2 coaches' names in their initial contact email to coaches. I actually have them included at the bottom of their signature, their email signature. So it's always there whenever they reply to a coach as well. So I tell them to pick, the one coach that they think will talk about them, not only their athletic ability, but perhaps even more importantly, their character, because that is important for coaches when we're recruiting. We want to make sure that you not only can play and not only can you achieve academically, but that you're going to contribute to our team culture in a positive way. So who better to answer that question but a coach that has spent time with you, throughout your junior career, your junior, high school career. But one of those references. But no, I would not include an attach. Again, back to the anything that was attached to an email I never opened. That includes any of these, glorious letters of recommendation that people have. These, I get it. You're a great student, but that's not the information that I need at the point in time that I have it. And like Joe said, I was moving from the tennis court to the office to my home to my, there were just so many moving parts for me to have an organized system to keep all of these extraneous letters of reference. It's just like an admissions counselor. They want what they want when they're reading applications. They don't want the extra stuff, even though we want to give it to them. We feel like they need to hear it. Coaches will ask for what they want to hear.
Friends, I just got back from Lynn University. We met the head baseball coach there. And he talked about how he literally gets over 200 emails a day from prospective athletes and how they can be overwhelming. So, friends, I can't emphasize enough, the subject line in your email is extremely important. You have to give them what they want, which is something Amy's repeated a couple times, in order to attract their attention. Your email may not even get read. How important is it, in your opinion, that the letter's customized? Like I did a session with Trinity University and their athletic liaison about 3 or 4 years ago. And this was something that was really emphasized there. Like, I can see a form letter a million miles away and I have no interest. I want to see that a person's put some time into getting to know us and that's reflected in their initial outreach. Is that something, do you think maybe that was just one person's opinion, or do you think that's really important and you really need to listen to that? That's kind of best advice for all schools in that initial correspondence. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that it's a little bit of a mix. You can't send extremely personalized emails to 50 different colleges every 2 weeks for a year and a half. Like, you'll drive yourself crazy. But you have to. It is definitely important to make the coaches feel that you are sending this email to them, that they're not just one form, it's absolutely crucial. So, just coming up with clever ways to do that, to, have a form that you can kind of swap in and do unique sentences for each program. I know most of us use kind of like a mail merge program where you can, you can merge in fields and you can put unique sentences and you can do all of these different things so that you can, kind of do less work, but also highly personalize each of them. And it's 100% true. Like, you can see just a copy and paste boilerplate email a mile away. And, especially when people like put the wrong team name or, do a bad copy and paste job, is like, being professional about it is super important.
How can a student tell if they're being invited to a camp, if it's just maybe a moneymaker for the coach? Like, I attended a couple athletic presentations from a group out in New Jersey, and they say, listen, it's great that Princeton's inviting you to their field hockey camp, but guess what? You're going to be back in the corner, likely, if you're not a priority, one of 100 people, and you're funding the coach's beach house. Okay. So you need to like know whether or not like they really want you, or this is part of the revenue generating machine. So what's your advice for a student being able to differentiate when, no, they seem to be very interested in me. I mean, this is a question I get this all the time. Oh, they invited me to this. Should I go? So what are your thoughts?
It's another mixed bag. It is. I like, I was a volunteer assistant for a couple of schools, and 100% of my income was camps, kids camps in the summer and prospect camps. And what I was eating with the money that people were paying to come to our prospect camp. So there's 100%, an aspect of that. And the other thing too is like, if we had a 60-person prospect camp, we had 5 guys who we were 100% looking at and invited to the camp because we really like them and we are very much recruiting them. But we needed people to pitch to them. We need people to catch the fly balls that they're hitting in batting practice. We needed to fill out that camp and have it be, 30, 40, 50 kids so that we could get a good look at those specific ones. But, so camps are both sometimes the most valuable thing that you can do in the recruiting process and also completely useless at the same time. And it's really hard to kind of like parse that a lot of times. And I think the strategy that I tend to use most is, can you get the coach to invest some of their time in you? Because if they're just sending you an email that's like, hey, come to our camp, it's on this date. I had a whole Microsoft Word document that was a string of emails that I would send, and it would be like, the first time they send me, boom, do our questionnaire. The second one would be, here are our camps. The third one would be, and it was just form each time. If a kid says, hey, I'm really interested in you and your camp, and I would love to do a phone call to find out a little bit more about it, I would not do that unless I was actually really interested. And if a coach is going to spend 10, 20, 30 minutes calling you on the phone, then there is some indication there. And if they're not willing to go out of their way at all, then you are just going to give them money. That is they're putting you into this funnel to raise that income. So engaging with the coach and trying to get them to invest in you a little bit is a really, really good indicator and can help you kind of figure out where you are at with that program.
I think that was so helpful because, kids feel so flattered when they get the mailers, right? And, oh, I'm being recruited. And then they're trekking all across the country. And the most precious thing somebody has is their time. I mean, I look at my own daughter, like the people that were serious about her, they were either coming to her games or coming to her travel games or proactively trying to get us to do a visit or aggressively trying to get us to come to their camps, versus the Virginia Tech. I remember she got her first letter from Virginia Tech in the 6th grade. And, there's a little bit of you got recruited in the 6th grade by Virginia Tech at a big AAU camp. It was just a form letter. It meant nothing, No, that was really helpful.
And the reality of, travel and logistics and stuff can come into it too. I'm in California. If Stanford sent a letter, and they have this opportunity and whatever, versus if the University of Miami sent a letter, it's like, if I can drive there and drive back and you just want to give it a shot, I've always wanted to play there, it's my dream school, and you can go there in a day, pay the $300 for the camp and go home afterwards, versus are you going to take a $2,000 flight with your parents and stay in a hotel for 3 days? And, it's like, there's such a big difference in investment. And it's like, you can kind of, just go for it with a dream school if it's a little bit more reasonable, versus like I would jump in front of a train to be like, don't fly to Miami to do this camp. Like, it is a terrible idea.
This is great.
Again, I think it comes back to like that targeted list, right? If you have a good, well-targeted list, and when I work with student athletes, I don't have them send a mass email out to hundreds of coaches. Like, we start with a targeted list and we let the responses inform how we move forward. And so if they're hearing from Stanford, okay, great. And when I say hearing, I mean the coach gets on the phone or starts texting with the student or, expresses that genuine interest. If they're hearing from Stanford, okay, then we know we can start funneling our list to be that caliber program. But if we're hearing from, a different caliber program, that's where our search is going to take us. And that's where, when we're deciding if we even want to do an ID camp, we want to make sure that it matches the level of interest we've received from the schools on that targeted list. And that's not to say, that's not to say that if you go to an ID camp and you totally knock it out of the park, that you're not going to capture the coach's attention. But it's like 1,000,001 chance if a coach hasn't heard about you before, hasn't seen you playing at a national event, or, based on your skill set. So yeah, that's all. Sorry.
Let me just one more rule of thumb that I love to do with my students, which is, if you walk into a prospect camp, the coach should be able to walk up and say, "Hey, Joe, how's it going?" Without you even having to be like, to introduce yourself. If you are at that level, it can be a valuable experience. If you're just going to the camp and they don't know who you are, it's going to be like Amy said, 1,000,000 to 1.
So I have one more question. And then one of our listeners sent in several questions, and I want to make sure that we answer some of those questions. So what are your thoughts on students being very direct with coaches? Like, where am I on your list? Or how serious are you about me? These kinds of things that may be a little bit uncomfortable for a coach, because the coach is trying to keep a lot of people warm, and maybe you're a reserve in case they don't get their top recruits, but you're trying to really figure out, like, what is the interest level? What are your thoughts on students being very direct in asking those kinds of questions to coaches once, let's say, they've gotten to a camp and there's been some interaction?
I think Amy or Joe, given the coach's perspective, would be a good one to answer that.
I'm happy to take it. I love it when student athletes advocate for themselves, and I loved it when I was a coach too. I think it showed a lot about their determination, and again, that's that character piece that I was looking for as a coach. I wanted players that could come in and make a difference in big matches, and if they had the fortitude to be able to pinpoint, or get me to tell them where they are on the board, then I was all about it. But the likely scenario there is the coach is going to say, "You're at the top of my list," which they probably would have said anyways if they were really excited about the recruit. Or they'll say, "We're in we want to watch you play some more." And that's a very common response to get from a coach. To me, when I'm explaining that to my student athletes, that means you're a player of interest, but you're on the B list, which means if things don't work out with the A list, then you might get a shot here. Or if you start really playing well, you could move up to the A list. But the only way for the coach to know is for you to continue to send, updates and to keep yourself front and center on their radar. So, so again, I guess just to circle back, I think it's great for a student to be persistent and assertive like that, but do it respectfully. And let's first try to do what I call translate the coach speak to see if we even need to ask the question.
That's good. I just thought of one more question I have to ask before we get to the listeners' questions. So a lot of parents, they really mean well, but they want to get involved, and they can cross lines and communicate in ways that as a coach, you want that coming from the student, not coming from the parent. So what would you say is appropriate or inappropriate parent behavior when it comes to communication?
I can say from the coaching perspective, we absolutely 100% want to hear from the student. It's a red flag if there's a lot of parent fingerprints on it, because just from experience, parents who are super over involved in the high school recruiting process, the kid comes to college, and those parents are super over involved in the kid's college life and their experience. And those are the kinds of parents who are going to be calling and being like, "Why isn't Jimmy playing? He's better than your second baseman that you've got out there right now. That kid's terrible." So it is definitely there are places where parents can be useful. I know on the baseball, the football, the basketball side of things is as a videographer is a lot of times where parents can make a huge difference. Getting good quality video is really hard for at a lot of places if the school isn't set up with like a whole camera system. And so that's where I tell parents all the time, it's just like, hey, you go, like, this is your job. You crush it. You go, get a tripod, get yourself out there and do your job, and then leave the communication to the student, because that is who the coaches want to hear from.
And managing logistics, if you are going to do some travel to a camp or ID camp, like a lot of times parents can be, they're doing all that, right? Whether it's booking hotels and arranging flights and all that stuff. But that's really helpful. Yeah. So you see an overly involved parent and you're thinking, okay, that's the person that's going to call me and say, why is little Johnny not playing more? Yeah. Good stuff.
I would also just add that, when the conversation in recruiting starts talking, when you start talking about money, I do think it's important that the parents are involved in that conversation, and that they are hearing the entire conversation, and that when it's appropriate that they can respond in that conversation. Again, giving your student, having an open conversation in your own family about what is affordable and what is required and what is necessary for this to all work out is a good thing. And as much as your student feels comfortable communicating that to a coach, great. But I always feel that it's very, very critical for the parents to be in the room, present, visible to the coach, so that everybody knows what was heard, because kids sometimes have very selective hearing and you really don't want to have selective hearing when you're talking about money.
Point well taken. Friends, this concludes part 3 of 4. I hope you'll join us next week for the final part on tips for athletes who want to play in college. Friends, on Thursday's episode, Hillary joins me to answer a question from a listener. We got a brand new interview with Barbara Kalmus on the topic of being really careful with the language you use when discussing your college list. And Grace Robertson-Lloyd from Grinnell joins me to help us understand Grinnell College. Friends, in closing, I want to share an email with you that I received this week from a podcast listener. And just so you know, I don't read emails on the air without permission. So I asked if I could share the email. And the listener said, let me remove some of the personal details, and then here's a version you can share. And I'm going to read it to you. Hi, Mark. I'm reaching out to say I really appreciate your podcast. It's been very helpful as I anticipate my oldest daughter, currently a sophomore, approaching the college application process. After hearing repeatedly on your podcast the refrain, it's not where you go, it's what you do when you get there, I've been thinking that maybe sharing the story of my journey and that of my husband could be helpful for high schoolers aspiring to a career in medicine. We are now both physicians, but we have not had a straightforward or always prestigious paths in medicine. I'm a primary care physician and a healthcare administrator. My husband's a urology subspecialist. I attended a top 20 college for undergrad, where I struggled academically for the first couple of years. I took time off after graduation to get life experience, and I was not admitted to medical school on my first try. This was a huge blow, but after completing a post-bac pre-med program, I did get in the next time around. After 4 years out of school, I attended Case Western Reserve Medical School, benefiting from their appreciation of us bent arrows who brought life experience to medical training. This is where I met my husband, who had attended University of Toledo for undergrad. When we went through the residency match, he interviewed at many of the top-tier programs, and he ended up matching at a large health system in Detroit, Michigan. He was initially very disappointed because it didn't seem like a prestigious program. In the end, though, it turned out to be the best thing for him. He was trained with the godfather of robotic surgery, and he had tons more hands-on surgical experience than residents had who were at the top programs in the country. He had amazing physicians that he met who became mentors and lifelong friends, who impacted his eventual specialty choice and the trajectory of his career. I recognize my path specifically was made possible in large part of a privileged family background. That said, it didn't feel easy as I was going through it. I just wonder if hearing about our journeys might be sort of helpful to aspiring physicians who don't have doctors in their families for perspective, or who do and believe that perfection at each step is essential. I'm grateful for my own nonlinear journey, and I believe it has made me a better physician. Although we are not pushing any of our kids to pursue medicine, if we can be helpful to someone out there whose goal is to pursue a medical career, we love the opportunity to do so. Thanks again for all you do, Mom from Minnesota. Friends, I appreciate these letters and these texts and your communication with us. And listeners, it's decision time, a month and a half away. And I want to emblazon some thoughts on the forefront of your mind. And it's precisely what the mom from Minnesota and her husband shared in the email. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Matvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.